first speaker I'd like to hand straight over to is Kat Bicknell, who's going to talk about the use of wikis in problem-based learning. So thank you, Kat.
Thank you. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk a bit about how we teach therapeutics teaching in pharmacy. We use a lot of PBL, and because of our large class sizes, so in excess of 100 students, we like to relieve our workloads, I suppose, for assessment by setting group work and problem-based learning exercises. But of course that increases the difficulties in providing an individual mark for group work. So I've introduced a wiki into the PBL exercise that I run to try to introduce an individual assessment component into the group work exercises. So problem-based learning, you'll all be familiar with hopefully, is a very important teaching tool in medical education, and it's becoming increasingly so in pharmacy. It's a self-directed learning tool that promotes both the acquisition and encourages students to apply the knowledge. So through our use of PBL, we aim to foster the development of problem-solving, critical thinking, and decision-making tools, and I think you'll all agree that these are critical skills that a pharmacist needs to develop for their professional practice. So what is therapeutics teaching? So in therapeutics teaching, we try to focus on the cause of a disease and how it's treated, and we put a particular emphasis on how a pharmacist would be involved in decision-making associated with the patient's treatment after they're diagnosed with the disease. We don't rely specifically on problem-based learning exercises. We're not that risk-taking. We combine it with a traditional lecture approach, but also allow them to apply the knowledge we try to introduce to them in their lectures in problem-based learning exercises that supplement the information we've given them. So in therapeutics, our PBLs involve students working in small groups. We did look at different sizes of groups. When we started, we were looking at groups of 10 students, and that was too unmanageable. So we've moved down to most groups are 6 students in size, and some are as small as 4 students. And we provide them with a clinical case study which they solve and then devise a treatment strategy. Of course, the problem is how do they share this information with their peers if they're the only group working on the exercise? And I'll come to that in a sec. So our challenges with therapeutics teaching at the School of Pharmacy are that we have 100 students per year, and probably fortunately for the university, it's increasing. So our last intake was 140, and we're expecting that to increase significantly. We need to cover what is considered essential content in fairly limited contact hours. For example, I teach musculoskeletal therapeutics to Part 3 students, and I have 5 hours to tell them everything they need to know about arthritis, osteoporosis. These are hugely, they're common gout, common diseases that pharmacists need to know about, and 5 50-minute lectures isn't a lot to cover. These important subjects can affect a person's quality of life. So we supplement that information that I tell them in the traditional lecture with a problem-based learning session. And for musculoskeletal, I have 4 hours. We need to highlight the clinical relevance of the material that we're trying to get them to acquire, because of course they need to be aware of why it's relevant for them to understand what we're telling them for their future clinical practice. So PBLs are really useful because they place an emphasis on student-led learning, and they reduce the need for me to whiz through lectures and teach them all the sort of necessary counselling points that each medication comes with. So some drugs that a patient can only take certain times of the day, and in a 50-minute lecture I don't have enough time to cover all these clinical points. So by working in small groups, I can cover a large number of diseases, through the clinical case studies that I set to students. They solve those, so they apply the knowledge that I've taught them in the lectures, and then they have the opportunity to share that information with their peers. Also, as they're applying the information that they've acquired, they really understand why it's clinically relevant for them to understand about these issues. But however, PBLs are an amazing tool for us, but they do raise several key challenges. And it mainly centres around the fact that they're working in small groups and they need to have an effective means to share the information with their peers. So group work, of course, we want to give them individual marks and individual feedback, and group work doesn't make that easy for us as their lecturers. And also finding an efficient means to get them to share the information with their peers has been tricky. A lot of the other therapeutics teaching uses oral presentations or poster presentations, but of course that's a fairly sort of a snapshot, and if a student isn't quite on the ball that day, they might miss key information. So I've introduced a wiki. So all the students that I've introduced to this task have been more than familiar with wikis, namely through Wikipedia. So basically, a wiki is a collaborative web page that students can basically take ownership of and create. And I set the task as they're creating a learning resource, a revision resource for themselves and their peers. So they do have full ownership. I set a number of case studies, between 8 and 12 case studies. And basically the students are set off to basically cover the diagnosis of that disease, the cause of the disease, and how it's treated. They work in their PBL groups, and in any average class we have between 16 and 24 PBL groups, and they have to find a clinical solution for the case study. All case studies covered in musculoskeletal PBL are potentially examinable. This wasn't such a big issue when we started off because we only had an intake of 38 students, so I could choose an exam question that wasn't covered by the PBL, whereas now definitely 2 of the groups working on a case study are going to have that wow moment, thank you, as they get the exam question that's set on the disease that they covered during the PBL. So, as I said, the results of their PBL exercise are shared with their peers through the collaborative web pages via the wiki, and I use the Blackboard Learn wiki tool. So how does the exercise work? So in week 1, it's a compulsory session. I give the students their case study, and we talk about the exercise at hand. So what is a wiki? They know what a wiki is, but I also introduce some of the problems that have arisen in past years. So the wiki exercise has been run for 4 cohorts today. So we talk about how to wiki, if they need to see what a wiki is and how it works, there's a video that can be downloaded from YouTube about what a wiki is and how it works. But I found it more useful to give them an example of a wiki, and I've created my own example to show them. We then get on Blackboard Live and go through what they need to do to create new pages, how to edit the pages. It's really, really straightforward in Blackboard. The students are usually quite happy with that. And then week 2 they set off and they start working on that clinical case study. So they research the problem, they start collecting relevant information, and we have an informal drop-in session. At this session it varies between wanting to know how they can upload images into the wiki, or sort of the technical issues associated with the wiki exercise, but also it can be clinical issues. By week 3, students have gained confidence and they've generated a first draft. And at this point, I share it with another PBL group who's worked on a similar exercise. So they're familiar with the background information, and their job is really to correct any mistakes in the wiki, sort of peer review. This is where students have a bit of an issue because they're not used to basically critically appraising other peers' work, and often tensions do arise. But again, we have a drop-in session with the tutor where I'm happy to solve any other problems. Week 4, students make the corrections suggested by their peers, and I share it with the whole class. And at week 5, we have a formal feedback session where I just make sure that all the points are fine, and I make changes to the wikis themselves so all the information is factually correct. So, in their wikis, students are asked to explain the diagnosis and create a patient information leaflet. Let's see if I can. And I'll show you an example of the wiki I put together that I show the students. So this is an example of a case study that I upload prior to the session. I then ask them to provide a diagnosis, differential diagnosis for the disease, and a rationale for the treatment. Students can insert comments into the pages that can be addressed by the group managing the page. I ask them to create a patient information leaflet that basically summarises all the information about that disease and its treatment. And then I encourage them to put in a list of their references and any links to useful web resources. So that's that effectively. I'm not doing very well on time. So how do students like the wiki exercise? Well, student engagement has been very high. 100% of students contribute each year to the wiki, and the feedback that we obtain for the module suggests that they enjoy the exercise. They continue to improve the wikis even after I've marked it. So that sort of says that they are engaged in the exercise. And they're often inspired by their peers. So one of the quotes I got back from feedback 2 years ago was, the other group's wiki was amazing. It made me want to make ours better. So that sort of suggests that they are engaged. They also appreciate the wiki as a revision tool. So here's another quote. I just wanted to say, well done for producing such a brilliant wiki page. It's really interesting, and I will definitely be using it as a revision tool. And this is fairly common feedback. So the wiki facilitates group work. They report a reduced need to meet in person, which is time-saving for them. And they like the idea that a tutor can identify freeloading members of the group through the wiki history. So that relieves often the group tensions that arise during PBL work. Some people say it complicates group work, so we've had problems with poor wiki etiquette. So some people really like to get going on a job early and finish what they need to do and move on. And that often leaves not much for the other group members to do. So those that are last-minute students don't enjoy that at all. And also people don't like people changing their work. So that often forms sort of edit wars. So it's important in the first session to establish a code of conduct. Yeah, no one likes their work deleted or changed. One of the key things that have come up... Sorry, I just got that. So one of the key things that came up is students find peer review really difficult, and that's one of the things that we're going to focus on in future years. They distrust their own peers' opinions, and they really aren't happy using it as a revision tool unless I guarantee I've looked at it and put my stamp that everything is correct. Also, the peer review, they were too gentle, and errors and omissions did creep through that I needed to correct. So just whiz through to... So yeah, so it's a popular exercise. It reduces the need for group meetings. A tutor can identify an individual's contribution to the group work, which allows you to mark individual contributions if you so wish. And it provides an excellent resource for students' revision. And yeah, what we're needing to work on in pharmacy is the peer review process. And that's it. Thank you.